Hello, I'm James Daggar-Nickson. Welcome to Media Week. My co-host, I should say, of course, James Manning, editor and publisher of Media Week, is here to take us through some of the week's major media headlines. But first, well, some sad news. We want to pay tribute to veteran ABC broadcaster Mark Colvin, who died today at the age of just 65 following a 20-year battle with a rare autoimmune disease, which he caught whilst covering the Rwandan genocide. His career with the ABC spanned more than 4 decades, and for the last 20 years, he was the very familiar and very loved voice of ABC Radio's current affair program, and also took the digital world by storm under, of course, the very famous alias Colvinius on Twitter. James Manning, we've seen an outpouring from the media in terms of grief as a result of this, a much-loved figure.
Yeah, and look, very appropriately on Twitter, as you say, you know, he was all over that all the time. He was a great person to follow because he'd retweet the most amazing stuff, that just facts and stuff that you'd find out. And, you know, he was on there recently, a couple of days ago, you know. So it's really sad. And as you mentioned, that PM program, I mean, I listen to most of my radio when I'm in the car these days. And if you're in the car at 6 o'clock, it was the place to go, wasn't it? Those ABC News headlines and then into that program. And just the sincerity, his, you know, the way he tackled subjects, you just knew, you know, you believed what he said, and it was, you know, yeah, it's a big loss.
And interesting to see as well, you know, people reminiscing about him from all corners. You've had politicians, media, you know, everyday Australians who no doubt listened to him, as you say, at that drive time slot. It was evening slot. It was clearly a much loved.
Yeah, and there'll be lots of colleagues, I think, reminiscing, writing stories about him in the next few days. So it'll be worth reading, following up all that stuff. And look, it's been a bad week for broadcasting too. Lou Richards passing away in Melbourne, you know, and just the, you know, when you think about it, he was the first big media personality, if you like, in the football era after TV launched. I think his career ended. He retired from footy about the same year free-to-air broadcasting launched in Australia.
It's a little bit before my time, but everything I read.
Yeah, no, I remember as a youngster that world of sport on a Sunday afternoon. Huge. I grew up in Melbourne. Yeah, it was just massive. And as a columnist in the Sun newspaper, now the Herald Sun, it was just, you know, a go-to place for your sort of your AFL entertainment. If you like.
Yeah, very sad. It'd be much missed, both of those two gents. Well, now moving on to some of the latest news, and of course Fairfax continuing to dominate. Some news today reports TPG threatening to walk away from its Fairfax bid following speculation that the board and shareholders are holding out for a better deal. The private equity investor made a $2.2 billion offer to Fairfax last week for a buyout of the company's top 3 mastheads, Domain and Events and Digital Ventures. However, Fairfax's board and shareholders, well, they want more and are angling, we believe, for about a $3.1 billion deal for the entire company. TPG warning Fairfax that it's taking a big risk. Well, for Fairfax, it's dismissing the threat as nothing more than simply posturing. So this is heating up a fair bit. And look, I can sort of see both sides. I mean, if you're Fairfax, of course you're going to try and want to get the best price, just like private equity want to try and get the lowest price.
Absolutely. I mean, we never bid on anything this big, but when you bid on something big in your life, there's 2 strategies, I guess. You either go in with your highest offer, thinking it's going to knock them out and that's it, take it or leave it, or you start off with a negotiation. So you would expect you'd start off with a negotiation. I'm thinking you're in private equity. Is your first offer ever going to be your best? Possibly not. So you would have thought there'd be some, you know, some room for movement.
What would be the argument for Fairfax not selling, for deciding to, even if they got an improved price, for deciding to go it alone?
Well, I think that the board are thinking they're at a real tipping point for the company now. Greg Hywood at I think it was the Macquarie conference last week, said, look, we don't think there's going to be any more retrenchments in the staff. We think we're at a place now. If we can get to this level of savings, then we can start to rebuild, we can start to invest again. And it's something we've asked him in all the times we've interviewed him here. Are you at that point yet? And he's always he's never been specific, he's never really answered it for us, but he sort of did last week when he said, look, we think we're at a level now that will sustain the business. They think they've got the domain growth. They think it's probably all upside from here. So they really could believe that, look, this sort of valuation as the company is well below what we think it's going to be worth in a couple of years.
Do you think they are a chance of eking out a better offer from TPG, who are notoriously aggressive and tough operators?
Yes, but would it be enough?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, because I think the gap between what would motivate Fairfax to recommend a bid at that level and where TPG at is possibly too great.
Well, let's suggest they are able to somehow bridge that gap. What sort of hurdles do you perceive as potentially being thrown up?
Well, there's the foreign investment review thing needs to be, is the government going to allow an outsider to come in? Because they're going to attract a lot of bad publicity. I mean, years ago, I think it was Conrad Black and the Canadians made an offer for Fairfax. It was knocked back, said, no, look, we wouldn't accept the foreign bid. And TPG needs an exit strategy. So they're going to want to be able to hive off some of those assets, particularly if they had to buy the whole company. And those current, unless that 2 out of 3 media law gets passed, are they going to be able to do that? So they would need some surety that those media law reform proposals would get through, I think.
And just quickly and finally on Fairfax, who would likely, do you think, or who are the candidates for running the business should TPG get its hands on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that Domain Co is what TPG's called, the part that would get Domain and the Metro assets. There's been talk that Anthony Catalano would take over that, who's running Domain at the moment. Look, he knows Domain inside out. He's got a great print background, of course, before he moved into specialising in real estate. So he would be the prime candidate. Whether he's on board with them yet, we don't know.
All right, let's move on. It's certainly been a big couple of weeks in terms of media. Media reforms back in the spotlight. They never really went away, but we've actually got some traction. Cutting licence fees for TV networks will also cut into advertising revenue and gambling during live sports broadcasts. There's plenty in the space at the moment. Well, for a little bit more of a discussion on around what's been proposed and the likelihood of it getting through, Andrew Maiden, CEO of ASTRA, joins us. Now, Andrew, great to have you on board.
Great to be here.
Reading some of the reaction, this is a quote from an unnamed person within the industry suggesting their takeaways from the proposals was a clever piece of political tap dancing.
Well, media reform always is, isn't it? It's hard to achieve, and we're years into this round. But the package that's been announced this weekend past is a reasonably good one. It's balanced in the sense that, first of all, it enables local incumbents to compete against the Googles and Facebooks a little better by giving them the possibility of achieving scale. And it delivers reform in a way that is reasonably fair to all of the incumbents in Australia.
I'd like to pull apart a few of the separate things, but firstly, maybe just, I'm interested if the legislation doesn't get through, there's half a dozen 8 elements to all the changes. Which of them do you think would go ahead even if the legislation doesn't pass?
Well, the ban on gambling ads is now
so that's a given,
a genie out of the bottle, and it can't be put back in. And so the challenge for the media sector, pay and free alike, is to try and claw back some of those losses. And the free TV industry, obviously licence fee cuts is the big item. For pay TV, there are some changes to the anti-siphoning laws.
So just on that, so free-to-air could be a double loser if they lose the gambling revenue from those ad restrictions, and they could face a possibility of not getting the licence fee cuts?
And that's the kind of political genius of this deal. It enlists the media sector to lobby on behalf of the government to get this package through the Senate, where the government needs to win 10 out of 12 crossbenchers, and they're not by any means at that point yet.
Do you think, though, the ban on gambling advertising, particularly if it does get, as you'd expect, the support of the free-to-air, is likely to get through? As you say, the genie's out of the bottle. There's no turning back, you think? No
turning back on that, because the gambling ad ban doesn't even require legislation.
Yeah.
That'll be done by the industry to itself under the threat of intervention if it's not done that way. Look, the losses for the sector will be in the tens of millions, so it has tens of millions of reasons to try and get licence fee cuts through and anti-siphoning changes through.
And just on anti-siphoning, something that yourself and the broader subscription television sector has lobbied long and hard for. Does it go far enough in terms of freeing up those sports that you are able to, will hopefully be able to bid for?
Well, look, we took a very pragmatic approach to anti-siphoning because we understand the political difficulty of taking much off the list. So we didn't seek to disturb the current arrangements for AFL or NRL, for instance. About 100 events can come off the list if this package goes through. None of them are going to move the needle greatly, but it's better than nothing, and it proves politically that you can amend the anti-siphoning regime without the sky falling in.
Do you think you got help from the last Olympics, Channel 7, right to the Olympics, and put a whole bunch of the events behind a paywall?
Well, I mean, this is in some ways the absurdity of anti-siphoning. It doesn't apply to digital, it applies only to pay TV licensees, because back in the 90s when this was drafted, that's the only language they could imagine. So Seven has put some Olympics behind the paywall, they've put tennis too behind a paywall, and they can do that because the rules that apply to Foxtel don't apply to anyone else.
Just on that, then, the absurdity of this, I mean, that the most contentious thing is possibly going to be that 2 out of 3 rule, which the Labor Party says they won't support because they say they're concerned about media diversity, but then this doesn't apply to the digital broadcasters, does it?
Well, I mean, the difficulty of digital is really how do you police it and enforce it when a lot of the entities you're talking about are based...
No, but it makes the point of trying to enforce it against old media. Why
right.
tie their hands behind their back?
And, you know, the Labor Party has left the door very slightly ajar on 2 out of 3. It's possible that perhaps through a series of measures the government could persuade it to support 2 out of 3. You know, maybe you can monitor and encourage diversity and pluralism at the same time as permitting that kind of consolidation. But really, I think it's more likely to come down to requiring the crossbench, and that means Nick Xenophon, who are obviously going to be happy with the gambling ad ban, but Pauline Hanson, whose position is a lot less defined.
Sorry, I was just going to say, let's say they do get the support of the crossbenchers and it is passed into law that the 2 to 3. How poised do you think is the sector for consolidation?
Well, the economics are going to require it. I mean, we can't go for many months longer without local companies being permitted to grow and achieve scale to compete globally. But, you know, just because the law changes doesn't mean of itself that M&A will necessarily occur. But on the economic side, I mean, it has to, or else you'll see a lot more journalists put out of work and a lot more TV workers out of jobs.
And Andrew, just talk to us a little bit about the Australian content, the review that's going to be underway there. Do we know when that will happen? And what do you think, I mean, what would the subscription TV sector, which you represent, and what do you think free-to-air would hope the outcome would be?
Yeah, look, that review will be undertaken by the department and will recommend changes to the minister by the end of the calendar year. So it's a 9 or 6 or 7 month timetable. We in Free TV actually have a unity ticket in most respects on content. You know, we would like to see higher tax offsets for TV production. At the moment in Australia, for instance, you have an absurd situation where you get twice as much of an offset for $1 spent in film than you do on TV, and that doesn't make sense in a world where content for one screen ends up on another. And, you know, that simple measure alone we think could add $100 million to the sector and create 360 new jobs, which are not to be sneezed at. And we'd like to see a little housekeeping too in respect of thresholds for tax subsidies and for Screen Australia funding.
What about the quota limits on Aussie content?
Well, you know, you don't have to be a political genius to guess that perhaps some reductions in quotas are on the way.
Is that bad news for the sector, though?
Well, look, we take the view that if you're a free TV network, you enjoy certain privileges. For instance, access to the spectrum owned by the public, and in return you owe the public certain obligations, and quotas are one of those obligations. So, look, I'd be happy to see those quotas decline, but if they do, some of the protections and privileges that the free-to-air networks enjoy should also decline in lockstep.
Can we ask, as you understand it, what happens next? I mean, talk about the need for, you know, particularly crossbench support on some of the reforms. As you understand it, what's the sort of timeline and where do we go to from here?
It's all about the Senate and it's all about the crossbench, so like in every industry. So the government will draft legislation that should be published in the next few weeks, and I expect it'll go into Parliament in June without being passed in June. It'll take a few more weeks. We may have a third Senate inquiry into media reform, but all going well, I think the industry is expecting this to land in August or September.
Fantastic.
Any chance that content review, some senators might say, look, we'd like to see this content review recommendations before we progress? Or?
Oh, look, there's a chance, but, you know, we can't keep on holding up media reform until every senator's pet issue is addressed. You know, whether it's Nick Xenophon on the legitimate concerns around Facebook and Google or someone on content, we've just got to get moving.
Right. And on that, we need to leave it there. Andrew Maiden, appreciate your time as always.
Pleasure.
CEO of ASTRA. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll get you across some of the movements on the market for some of the key media stocks, plus all the latest ratings. Stay with us.
With outstanding quality, durability, reliability, safety and service, it's no wonder we're Australia's #1 forklift company. Toyota Material Handling. Solutions for every pallet.
John West has tuna certified by the MSC, the world's best standard in sustainability, supported by WWF, which means your choice today will help us ensure that we have healthy oceans forever.
There's tough. And then there's a new breed of tough. The new Amarok, now standard with App Connect and rear view camera. From only $42,990 drive away, now with free 8-speed auto.
Buying the perfect property can be a real challenge. You can spend months looking around only for the home you find to be bought by someone else. That's why I founded property buyers agency Cohen Handler, to empower the buyer to own the home of their dreams. With hundreds of successful purchases, we take the stress and long hours out of trying to buy a new home by guiding, negotiating, and purchasing your property. Simply call Cohen Handler today and tell us what you want in a property, and let us show you everything that exists in the marketplace, based on your criteria, including location, price, and potential growth.
Thanks to Cohen Handler, we were able to find the perfect home for our family to grow into.
We met with Cohen Handler in late January, and by April we had purchased a property.
There's nothing to lose. Save time and money. Get the experts from Cohen Handler on your side and find your perfect property today. Go online now at cohenhandler.com.au or call 1300 420 160 and get the right property at the right price.
For 16 years I kept this secret from my wife, my brother, my sons. How I was able to do that and maintain any degree of sanity, that worries me when I think about it.
Mom, do you understand what he's done?
I just want to know what's going on.
There's a 17th floor? Who else knew?
What are we gonna do?
Are you going to go to jail?
Probably.
And he took our entire life savings.
So what are you saying? We have to turn him in?
You don't turn him in, you're an accomplice.
What's going
How
on?
much do you want me to put out?
So you were never suspicious of your father?
You're asking me how I didn't know?
What's going
You're the FBI. How would you not know?
What
did you do with the money?
I'll go crazy, Bernie. I will.
How could you do this?
What's going on?
We're here to find out if there's an innocent explanation.
There is no innocent explanation.
The Wizard of Lies premieres Sunday, May 21 on Showcase.
What does this pretty as a picket fence bungalow in Melbourne, this 3-bedder in Adelaide and this Sydney character-filled That's Code That Needs Work have in common? You want to know how much they'll go for. Find out live as they go under the hammer on Sky News Real Estate.
Welcome back to the program. My co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Mediaweek, is here. We're going to be going through some of the key news stories, plus ratings of the week. Before we do, though, we're discussing media reforms, discussing Fairfax. Some of the share price movements and some of these listed media stocks has been quite incredible. For a wrap of all the latest moves, here's Ben LeBrun from Options Express.
It has been a busy week for media stocks, starting with News Corp, probably most importantly because they released some quarterly earnings in the US a couple of sessions ago. Now, it actually came in better than estimates, even though the full year loss has narrowed. It is still a loss of $5 million.
Apologies, a couple of issues there with the audio, but take my word for it. A lot of the free-to-air stocks went gangbusters. Fairfax has been a little bit up and down. Let's turn our attention to some of the key headlines of the week. We'll start off with, with earnings. News Corp, of course, coming out with some Q3 numbers. What did you make of them?
Yeah, look, they Robert Thompson, CEO, talked about, the company continues to pursue a digital strategy and a global strategy. They want to be all around the globe, but they're really focusing on digital. They said ads continue to be volatile, especially in their print products, and again they face that problem of trying to upsell those advertisers to the digital audiences. They wrote off some of the Presto costs as part of the Foxtel. I think it was about $21 million loss there with I don't know if that's the final bookkeeping on Presto. I think it possibly is. Foxtel, a few challenges there for the business. But look, it wasn't a bad result for them, but there's still a few challenges.
Let's talk some media moves. Neil Whittaker, editor-in-chief of Vogue Living, of course, he's on the block. He's on a new Foxtel show as well. He's leaving to do what? Do television full-time?
Yep, stepping down, He's a judge on the block. I Love It or List It is his new program with Andrew Winter on Foxtel. Sounds like it'll do very well for them. He's not leaving Vogue Living completely. They've just had their 50th anniversary edition just a couple of weeks ago. He was hosting a function for that. He's going to stay under the title Editor-at-Large, so his brand will still be associated with it. And you've probably seen his column in the Sunday Telegraph will continue. So there are definitely some links with news he's keeping alive.
Interesting news as well out at Nine Entertainment. Amanda Lang, she's leaving. She was formerly the General Counsel and moved into a MD role.
Yeah, we had her on the program not that long ago. She talked about some of their sports rights. She's sort of one of the deal makers there, and she got promoted, I think, off the back of some of the success she had there, landing some of those big rights. But yeah, she's stepping down. Don't know what she's going to do next.
Got to ask, any idea where she...
Bit of speculation on the weekend. She might be a potential leader at Seven in the future. Tim Warner, until the sort of existing matters with, Amber Harrison are finally settled. Still speculation over what might happen to him. Her name came up as a potential there. But the NRL, the netball was probably her most recent thing she was associated with at Nine.
NBC Universal here in Australia and New Zealand, they've got a new programming director.
Yeah, look, Caroline Cleland is the person there. She's been with the company a long time, knows it inside out. So NBC Universal got some great properties. I think Universal's channel is probably their flagship here. A lot of US dramas are run on the channel there. E, of course, the entertainment channel, home of the Kardashians and all the spin-offs there in Australia, and the Sci-Fi channel, which is manna for sci-fi fans.
Look, you touched on Channel 7 and potential moves or replacements for Tim Warner if or ever he happens to move away from there. Links nicely. Dave Hughes had some interesting comments about apparently getting booted, rightly or wrongly, from a panel he was going to be on, a comedy sort of panel. He's got his thoughts around why. Yeah, look, there's been a bit of dispute over this one. Dave was set to be a guest on a panel show. They're very popular panel shows. They're low cost. You get reasonable audiences for them. Channel, I think it's Behave Yourself is a new one coming up on 7. And then he got told, no, look, we don't want you. He says he thinks he got dropped because of his comments at the Logies, that joke about Tim Warner. Channel 7 came out and said, no, nothing to do with it. Apparently Tim Warner even rang him to say, look, you're welcome on the channel, and we'd like to get you on in future. But he still maintains that he thinks there was something behind it. Of course, he used to be one of the faces of Network 10. He was a regular on the project. Now he's more aligned with 9. He's on the AFL footy show every week. So it would be new for him to crop up on Channel 7, but not happening just yet. Channel 10, MasterChef, back on TV. One of the big name judges, George Calombaris, in the headlines, though, for the wrong reasons.
He's had a few challenges this year, hasn't he? There was these sort of claims about his underpayment of staff at his...
Dave Hughes had a go at him as well.
Restaurant empire, yeah, absolutely. And then, the A-League Grand Final just last weekend, which, by the way, was the biggest ever A-League TV audience, 367,000 for Fox Sports. So they did very well out of that. But, yeah, look, he was getting a bit of verbal from the crowd as he walked around, as a lot of celebrities and players do. You think, look, you've got to put up with a bit of that stuff. He didn't want to. He went into the crowd, faced up to one of the accusers, poked him in the chest. They pressed charges, I think, so we'll see where that goes.
And look, just finally, in terms of some of the television news, good news for Wentworth fans. We've got a 6th season.
Yeah, look, it's coming back. It's really one of the hallmarks, the big things for Foxtel are those Aussie dramas that really drive their audiences, are very important for their subscriptions and the renewals, and that's coming back again, Wentworth.
Let's get to the ratings, James. We'll take a look at the ratings for week 18, free to air, kicking off 1 through to 5. My Kitchen Rules. Well, now no Married at First Sight to contend with, dominating 7 News, and then the new, obviously, juggernaut, The Voice, getting in there as well. But My Kitchen Rules, the winner, the grand final.
Yeah, look, did very well for them, finished up. Look, the numbers aren't what they were year on year, but they aren't for any shows anymore. You've just got to accept it's not a story anymore that your numbers are going to be down year on year. The way audiences consume those TV contents are changing significantly.
Flicking over now, let's take a look at numbers through 6 to 10. The Voice in there as well. MasterChef, really just cracks it.
Yeah, it's launched all right, and it's certainly got 10 back very much more competitive than they were just a couple of weeks ago. It's certainly amazing what the difference one show can do.
Subscription television, let's take a look at the ratings for week 18. As always, the sport tends to dominate in the AFL. Goodness me, top 3 places.
Yeah, and 4 of the top 5. Probably slightly because NRL sort of had a weekend off. They had some rep games last weekend on the NRL, so not as many games to choose from there, but very strong weekend for the AFL.
Turning the page. This is for non-sport, for subscription television, Selling Houses Australia, which of course is the new series now as well.
Yep, doing very well. Wentworth, we've just been talking about.
And The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, look, a brand that still does very well in the repeats, both for 9, for 7 and on subscription TV.
Everyone's getting it on. James Manning, a pleasure as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
That is it for the program for this week. Thanks very much for watching.